The village of Millbrook knew Iris Ashford as the ghost girl. Present, but never really there. She lived in the old stone cottage at the edge of the woods, tending a garden that bloomed with impossible beauty, while she herself seemed to fade into the background. At 23, she moved through the market like smoke, purchasing what she needed with whispered words and downcast eyes before disappearing back into her sanctuary. No one knew why she'd come to Millbrook 3 years ago, arriving in the dead of winter with nothing but a single bag and hollow eyes that had seen too much. The elderly woman who'd owned the cottage had taken pity on her, and when she passed 6 months later, Iris had inherited the place, along with its isolation. Ethan Rivera didn't believe in ghosts. The 30-year-old architect had come to Millbrook to restore the old church, a 6-month project that would give him space to think, to breathe, to escape the noise of the city. He first saw Iris on a Tuesday morning, kneeling in her garden with dirt-stained hands, whispering to her roses as if they might whisper back. "Beautiful flowers," he said, leaning against her fence. She startled so violently that she knocked over her watering can, water spreading across the dark soil. Her eyes, gray as storm clouds, met his for barely a second before she looked away. "Thank you," she murmured, so quietly he almost missed it. "I'm Ethan. Just moved into the cottage by the church." She nodded but said nothing, her fingers trembling as she righted the watering can. He noticed the scars then, thin white lines across her wrists, disappearing beneath the sleeves of her oversized cardigan. Old wounds, carefully hidden. "Well, I'll let you get back to it," he said gently, recognizing the signs of someone who needed space. But he came back the next day, and the day after that, not pushing, just greeting her in passing, commenting on the weather, the progress of her tomatoes, the cardinal that had made a nest in her oak tree. Iris never said more than a few words, but Ethan noticed small changes. The way she'd glance up when she heard his footsteps, how she'd linger a moment longer before retreating inside. 3 weeks into his project, he found her struggling with bags of soil too heavy for her slight frame. Without asking, he lifted them, carrying them to her garden shed while she hovered uncertainly behind him. "You don't have to," she started. "I know," he interrupted with a warm smile. "But neighbors help neighbors, right?" For the first time, her lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile. It vanished quickly, like sun breaking through clouds before the storm returned, but Ethan had seen it. And in that moment, he decided he'd do whatever it took to see it again. The breakthrough came during a summer thunderstorm. Ethan was running from the church when he heard the crash, something falling in Iris's garden. Through the sheeting rain, he saw her greenhouse door swinging wildly, glass panels shattering as they hit the ground. Without thinking, he vaulted her fence and began securing the door, getting soaked and cut in the process. Iris appeared from nowhere, helping him wrestle it closed. By the time they finished, both were drenched and bleeding from small cuts. "Inside," she said urgently, the most forceful words he'd heard from her. Her cottage was exactly what he'd imagined. Books everywhere, dried flowers hanging from beams, a fire crackling in the hearth. She brought towels and a first aid kit, her hands surprisingly steady as she cleaned the cut on his forearm. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did." Their eyes met, and this time she didn't look away immediately. "That's what people do for each other, Iris. Not for me. Not usually." The pain in those words made his chest tighten. "Then they were idiots." She laughed, a soft, rusty sound, as if she'd forgotten how. "You don't know me, so tell me." The invitation hung between them. Iris bit her lip, warring with herself, then made a decision. She poured 2 cups of tea, settling into the armchair across from him. "I was engaged once," she began, her voice barely audible over the rain. "His name was David. Everyone thought we were perfect together. I thought I loved him." She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "He was controlling. At first, it seemed like devotion, He wanted to know where I was, who I talked to. He'd get angry if I went anywhere without telling him. Then the anger became something else. Ethan felt rage building in his chest, but kept his expression neutral, letting her speak. The scars on my wrists. I didn't do that to myself. He did it one night when I tried to leave. Said if I wouldn't stay with him alive, I'd stay with him dead. Her hands trembled. I barely made it out. I've been running ever since. Afraid he'd find me. Afraid to let anyone close, because what if I choose wrong again? What if I can't see the signs? Iris. He moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her shaking hands in his. That wasn't love. That was imprisonment. And you were brave enough to escape. I don't feel brave. I feel broken. You're here. You survived. You built something beautiful out of ashes. He squeezed her hands gently. That's the definition of brave. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of hope in those storm-gray eyes. The weeks that followed brought a tentative friendship. Ethan started bringing coffee in the mornings, sitting on Iris's porch while she worked in the garden. She began talking more. Small stories about her childhood before everything went wrong, dreams she'd abandoned, books she loved. One evening, Ethan invited her to see the church restoration. She hesitated at the threshold, old fears rising, but he held out his hand. Just architecture, he said softly. But I thought you might appreciate the stained glass. She took his hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, Ethan felt her pulse racing, but she didn't pull away. Inside, the church glowed with colored light from the restored windows. Blues and golds and crimsons splashing across the old stone. It's beautiful, she breathed, tilting her face toward the light. Like someone else I know. Iris turned to him, surprise and something else, something warm, in her eyes. Ethan, I'm not him, he said, stepping closer. I would never hurt you, never control you. I just want to know you, Iris, the real you. What if the real me is too damaged? Everyone has damage. It's what makes us human. He reached up, gently tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. And you're not damaged, you're healing. She leaned into his touch, a soft sigh escaping her lips. I'm scared. I know. But I'm not going anywhere. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, Ethan leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, tender, asking rather than taking. Iris froze for a heartbeat, then melted into him, her hands clutching his shirt as if he might disappear. When they broke apart, she was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Did I? Ethan started, panicked. No, she interrupted, laughing through her tears. These are good tears. I forgot what it felt like to be touched with kindness. He pulled her close, holding her while she cried out years of fear and pain. When the tears finally stopped, she looked up at him with wonder. Take me somewhere, she whispered. Outside the village. I haven't left since I arrived. Are you sure? With you, yes. Show me I can do this. The next Saturday, they drove to the coast, 2 hours away. Iris was nervous during the drive, her hands clenched in her lap. But Ethan talked easily about nothing important, letting her adjust. When they reached the beach, she stood at the edge of the sand for a long moment before taking off her shoes and running toward the water. Ethan watched her spin in the waves, arms spread wide, laughing with pure joy. When she ran back to him, breathless and radiant, she threw her arms around his neck. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me back the world. They became inseparable. Iris bloomed like her garden, growing bolder each day. She started selling her flowers at the market, actually talking to customers, making friends. At night, she and Ethan would lie in her garden under the stars, her head on his chest while he traced patterns on her skin. I never thought I could feel this way again, she murmured one evening. Safe, happy. Ethan kissed her forehead. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. Their relationship deepened. The first time Iris invited him to stay the night, she was trembling with nerves and desire. Ethan took his time, worshipping every inch of her skin with reverent touches, showing her how different intimacy could be when it was built on trust and respect. When she finally fell asleep in his arms, peaceful and content, Ethan felt something shift in his chest. He was falling in love with this brave, beautiful woman who was learning to live again. But 3 months into their happiness, the past came knocking. Iris was at the market when she saw him. David, older now, but unmistakable. Her blood turned to ice, her vision tunneling. He hadn't seen her yet, was asking the baker something. But it was only a matter of seconds before. Their eyes met. His face split into a smile that made her stomach revolt. Iris ran. She didn't remember the trip home, only that suddenly she was locked in her cottage. Every window sealed, curtains drawn, heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She grabbed her phone to call Ethan, but her hands shook too badly. All she could do was curl into a ball and wait for David to kick down her door like he'd done before. An hour later, Ethan arrived to find her unresponsive to his knocking. He used the key she'd given him weeks ago, finding her in the corner of her bedroom, eyes wide and unseeing. Iris, sweetheart, what happened? He knelt beside her carefully, not touching until she focused on him. He's here, she whispered. David. He found me. He's in the village. It's over, Ethan. I have to run again. I have to. No. His voice was firm. You don't run anymore. We face this together. You don't understand. He's dangerous. He'll hurt you to get to me. Then we go to the police. We get a restraining order. We don't let him win. Ethan cupped her face gently. Iris, look at me. You're not alone anymore. You have me. You have friends here. You have a community. You're not that terrified girl he tormented. You're strong now. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm falling apart. Then I'll hold you together. He pulled her close. But we don't run. Not this time. The next morning, Iris and Ethan went to the police station together. She gave her statement, shaking but determined, detailing David's past abuse and the restraining order she'd obtained before fleeing. The police assured her they'd enforce it, would monitor David's movements in the village. He can't touch you, the officer said kindly. Not anymore. But Iris knew David. He'd find a way. That night, he proved her right. Ethan was staying at Iris's cottage when they heard the shouting. Iris, I know you're in there. We need to talk. David was at the gate, eyes wild, obviously drunk. Ethan moved to the door, but Iris caught his arm. Let me, she said quietly. I need to do this. Then I'm coming with you. Together, they stepped onto the porch. David's face twisted when he saw Ethan. Who the hell is this? You replaced me? After everything I did for you? Everything you did to her? Ethan corrected coldly. Shut up. This is between me and my fiancé. I'm not your anything, Iris said, her voice stronger than she felt. I never was. You were my jailer, my tormentor. But I'm free now, David, and I'm never going back. You think you can just leave? You think you're better than me? David rattled the gate. I made you who you are. No. Iris stepped forward, Ethan a solid presence beside her. You tried to break me, but I survived you. I rebuilt myself. I found real love, real happiness, and you have no power over me anymore. I'll make you regret this, David snarled. I already pressed charges for what you did to me. Iris continued, her voice ringing clear in the night air. The police have my statement, my medical records, everything. You come near me again, and you go to prison. Your choice. David stared at her, finally seeing the truth. She wasn't his victim anymore. With a string of curses, He stumbled away into the darkness. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors had called them, as David was led away in handcuffs for violating the restraining order. Iris turned to Ethan and buried her face in his chest. But she wasn't crying. She was laughing, free, genuine laughter. "I did it," she whispered. "I actually stood up to him." "You were magnificent," Ethan murmured, holding her tight. That night, in the safety of her cottage, Iris and Ethan made love with new intensity. A celebration of her freedom, her courage, her choosing to live rather than just survive. When she fell asleep in his arms, she dreamed not of darkness, but of gardens and beaches and endless possibilities. 6 months later, Iris stood at the village festival, her flowers displayed proudly, laughing with customers and friends. Ethan watched from across the square, his heart full. She caught his eye and smiled, bright, unguarded, completely free. She'd finally stepped fully into the light, and she was radiant.